evening, good night, whichever part of the world and whatever time zone you're joining us from. Welcome! Welcome to the 2023 edition of the Black Consciousness Festival, where we're focusing on healing and reconnection for a second year. The Black Consciousness Festival is a global platform that connects people of African descent with each other by sharing and encouraging exchange through information, traditions, histories, intentions, traumas, celebrations, legacies, stories connecting to pride, power, and practice. Our inaugural year was in 2020, where we created a month of conversations and activities around topics of Black consciousness. In 2021, we had a few events: a youth festival, a weekend of conversations and reparations, and in November, conversations on shift, as we explored the many ways in which we as people of African descent shared and rebirthed elements of ourselves. In 2020, we focused on healing and reconnection for the first time, and we've decided to continue that theme this year because it's so important for our soul. The recordings of all of these conversations are available on our website, theblackconsciousnessfestival.com, and our YouTube channel. As you listen to the conversations, we encourage you to be kind to yourself. Pause, breathe consciously, move, and appreciate all that you are. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome. It's my pleasure to welcome you to another of our illuminating conversations. We understand the importance of the environment and the impact of the climate on us. And to lead this conversation, Ival Grant Williams, in conversation with some youth about where do we go from here, youth reflections on healing our planet. Hi, Ival. How are
Hello,
you
hello.
doing?
I am well. How are you, Erica?
I'm doing well, thanks. Good to see you. And I know you're
Likewise.
going to have a scintillating conversation, so enjoy it.
Thank you, thank you. So, yes, welcome again, everyone, to this conversation about climate control. And youth advocates are joining us today who are doing an amazing job of moving this work around the globe, from South Africa, Dominica, Uganda. Um, this is truly a panel of inspiring advocates. So I think at this point, I'll give them an opportunity to um, introduce themselves, and let's hear some opening statements from them. So let's see who's here. I think we have Raeesah and Dixon. All right. Hello, Raeesah. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. So please, enjoy. Hi, Dixon. So maybe, Raeesah, if you could introduce yourself and maybe share an opening statement with everyone regarding your thoughts on the importance of youth involvement in healing our planet.
Hello. Okay, so my name is Raeesah Noor-Mahomed. I'm 21 years old. I'm from South Africa. I just finished my degree where I majored in environmental and geographical science, theatre, and anthropology at the University of Cape Town. And I call myself an intersectional activist because I believe that everything is connected and nothing can be viewed in isolation. And when combating the climate crisis and combating issues, it is vital to look at everything together in connection with each other so that we don't leave anything or anyone behind. So that's why I'm an intersectional activist. And yeah, I've been doing activism for 5 years. And yeah, I think youth involvement is important because, well, everyone's involvement is important, but throughout the years, it has always been the youth who have been at the forefront of change and revolutions. And I think
That's right. That says it all. That is right. That is right. I mean, definitely, youth are important because you are the future, right? Or we are the future. I'm going to include myself in this age level. So definitely youth involvement is critical, I think, for any change in any area across the globe, right? Hi, Dixon. Hello again. Please introduce yourself, Dixon, and share your thoughts on the importance of youth involvement in healing our planet. It looks like you're still on mute, Dixon. There we go.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for this great opportunity. I'm Dixon Bahandagira. I'm 25 years old. I'm a clim- Hi everyone, I'm Dixon Bahandagira.
We can hear you.
I'm 25 years old. I'm a climate activist. I work with different youth organizations such as the Greenpeace, Green Futures Initiative, Rise Up Movement, and FF MAPA. I work with climate victims who are displaced because of the occurrence of the climate crisis in different places of the country. The Mhocha IDP camp in Kasese, these are people who were displaced because of the flooding that happened in 2020, and up to now they haven't been settled in a good place. They are still in the camp suffering. And I am the national coordinator of 1 million tree planting project, and we have managed to plant over 600,000 trees since 2019.
Wow.
I participate in different advocacy, protest strikes so that we can put our leaders on pressure, act, because we need urgency, because we are in an emergency. This is a climate crisis that is happening, and the only way we can do it is to put pressure to our leaders to act. Like youth are truly needed if we are to defeat the climate crisis, because we all know we are the leaders of the future, and the future is today. We need to come together as the youth to defeat crisis, because we have supported our leaders, we have supported whoever comes with a solution, but they all think of making profits. And if you start to think of profits in a dying planet, no way you can make it, no way you can bring change. We need people who will focus on creating a better space for the next generation. We need to start thinking about the next generation, not the next election. Because most of the leaders are only thinking about the next generation, rather the next election than the next generation.
Right.
I'm truly happy to share my perspective about this. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I mean, thank you in advance to both of you for being here today and for sharing your perspective and your experiences. One of the things that I think is very admirable, you both touched on it, is the intersectionality of climate justice and climate control and social justice issues. Dixon just said it pretty clearly that there's sort of three pathways, or there's three sections of work that's being done simultaneously. Planting 600,000 trees, which is amazing in such a short period of time, while also handling or providing support to those who have been, as he would say, climate victims, of a flood, and at the same time advocating for climate justice with elected officials. So those three streams of work are being done simultaneously. So it speaks to how dynamic this work really is. Raeesah, I know we've talked a little bit about intersectionality, but maybe if you can share a little bit of your perspective on that, and how does climate change intersect with other social justice issues, and how can youth advocates address these intersections for more comprehensive solutions?
So, how I describe it sometimes and how I see it in my mind is um, with so many different problems, like individual problems, community problems, you can kind of trace it back down. And when you trace down where it comes from, you can see them connecting. It's like tree roots. It all starts connecting. And I always say that the climate crisis has its roots in colonization. It has its roots in stealing from indigenous people, stealing indigenous people. It has its roots in all of those injustices, industrialization. And if you look at those things, colonization, exploitation, industrialization, and you look outwards at all the things that they've caused, you can kind of see then how everything intersects. And for me, when it comes to dealing with the climate crisis, a lot of what we've been noticing with solutions that have been proposed and green agendas that are being pushed, especially by the global north, is I'll use the example of green electricity, green energy. There's this idea that if it's good for the environment, it's good. If we're switching over from fossil fuels to something else, then it's automatically good. But there isn't that acknowledgement that before we even knew that it was bad for the environment, it was already exploitative. And if we don't deal with that, and also another thing is there's this massive energy inequality right now where I think over 1 billion people or even more don't have access to energy at all. So in a transition, they don't address that. They don't address what happens to the people who don't have access to energy at all. What do they transition from? And so that's why intersectionality is so important to be dealing with constantly, because you have to be looking at all these different things, these different issues, and looking at the different things that impact them, because we're in this place because we're in the place that we are at because we stopped living as communities, as people helping each other, and profit started being put before people. And so if we want to combat the climate crisis, we have to combat the cause of the climate crisis, which is this mass industrialization, mass capitalism, and start ensuring that the individual is looked after, which is not happening right now.
Yeah, yeah. Dixon, how in your work, how do you see that conversation evolving in terms of access to, let's say, educational programs that better equip young people with the knowledge and the skills needed to be effective advocates for environmental sustainability?
Yeah, like this is what I can tell you. As youth who are already advocating for the climate education in schools, because if we are to talk about how best we can defeat the climate crisis is through awareness and education. If we educate people, if people get to know that this crisis happened because of this and that, we shall defeat it. But we are still chasing, we are still trying to put our government on pressure to allow or to put the climate education into the curriculum. But it's not happening. That's why you see very many young people out there are trying to come up with climate education awareness campaigns, workshops to different areas, because we know if people get to know the importance of planting trees, how trees help to reduce the greenhouse emission, it will really benefit us. If people get to know how dangerous it is to cut down trees, they will stop that. But are leaders ready to do that? They think it doesn't make them popular. They think it doesn't make them money. They have to still focus on oil. If you tell them there is oil in this district, they will run and come and build refineries and invest in billions of money because they're going to make profits. But if you tell them, if we do climate education, if we educate the masses, it will be easy for us to defeat the climate crisis. They won't listen. And no doubt about that, if we want to defeat the climate crisis, if you want everyone to be part of the big movement you want to create, is to start with awareness, is to start with climate education. There is no doubt people should know what is happening, because other people still think it's a cultural thing, like flooding is happening, that's culture, or it's godly sent or something. But this is happening because of the changes in weather patterns. They don't know that. And we should really focus on education if we are to bring in many people to contribute on the fight, because we need, I think, 1,000 of activists, 1,000 of environmentalists for us to make everything right. And we were already tried by our leaders, and we know very many people are dropping out of school, that young people are no longer going to school because of the climate crisis. Like, we are in rainy season currently in Uganda, and schools are closing. You can't believe it, because there is flooding in different parts of the country. Last week I was in Luka district. The rainstorm destroyed schools. The rainstorm destroyed plantations. And we are in an agro-based country, an agro-based economy. We feed on agriculture. When such situation happens, young kids, our parents will fail to raise our school fees to go to school. So it's a big topic, a huge thing. If we are ready to defeat the climate crisis, we have to think about how best we can educate people. Our parents should know. If we don't fight this, there's no way your kid will go to school. If we don't conserve the environment, it will affect the next generation.
Right, right. I mean, we've talked. I mean, we've talked about education, access to information. We've talked about policy, advocacy, and the role of government. And we've talked about how important it is for there to be youth-led initiatives. Now, as I listen to you, I'm also thinking about technology and innovation. Right. Um, Raeesah, I saw your eyebrows go up. How can technology and innovation how do you think that can be harnessed by young advocates like yourself to address these environmental challenges? And hello and welcome, Ferdison. It's nice to have you with us. Hi. Um, so, Raeesah, yes, technology and innovation. How do you think it can be harnessed to address these challenges?
I just have an expressive face. No, but technology and innovation. I think one thing that we definitely need to talk about is this unequal access. And when we look at things like the Sustainable Development Goals and we look at global agendas, a lot of it is based on what the global north has. And when we look at the climate crisis and sustainability, we talk about a transition. And the global north and Western countries, they have something to transition from because they built their cities and their industries and everything. They have their energy that runs on resources that were stolen from us. They developed themselves at the expense of us. But when we look at African countries, a lot of African countries still don't have that. We don't have anything to transition from yet. And so when we look at technology and innovation, I think what's really important, because so many countries, and especially on a global level, global agendas, when we talk about moving forward, I think it's a misconception that we need to, and so many countries, so many governments think that we need to get to the point where the West is and then transition. And I think this is a really good chance for us to develop. I don't like the word just has such weird connotations, but develop in ways that are completely different, because we are in the crisis we are in currently because of what the West did. And so I think that with the technologies and innovations we have, we should use this opportunity to develop in a way that is different, that is Afrocentric, that is suited to what we need, that isn't exploitative, that doesn't rest on taking from other people. And I think right now with the technology we have, scientists say all the time that there is the technology to be more green. There is the technology to transition sustainably, and I think, it's on that. But also, I think it's really important. One of my biggest passions is grassroots. And so with the technology and technological innovation we have, I think that we have the ability to focus on communities, because every single community has its own needs and its own requirements and its own needs. And when you try and apply this global or this mass solution on things, it's never going to work. We can the ability to work hand in hand with technology to create grassroots solutions. It's just now the resource distribution and the support, the issue.
Yeah. Can you, well, I'm going to shift a little bit just for a second to Ferdison. I know you just joined us, but please do welcome and thank you for joining us. And please do introduce yourself and maybe just state why this topic is important to you.
Hey, good morning. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay. Thank you for having me. My name is Ferdison Valmond. I am from the Commonwealth of Dominica. That's a small island in the Caribbean region. I am a climate activist, and I'm also an indigenous youth activist because I come from the last surviving pre-colonial tribe in the West Indies. We're formerly known as the Caribs. So we came from all the way from North America, and my role in climate activism started at the age of 15. I'm currently 20 years old. And during that time, I managed to get involved in a lot of regional and international conferences that really covered climate change. And so far that at the age of 16, I was the youngest person to ever be involved to hold leadership position in over 13 NGOs globally. And they all covered climate change. And to me, climate change is important because since after Dominica was devastated by Hurricane Maria in 2017, the indigenous community suffered a lot. We relied on agriculture and fishing to survive. And after the passage of the hurricane, we had to really move away from being more into agriculture. So the interest of indigenous people moved slowly away from agriculture. However, there is efforts being made to revamp or revitalize the interest in these areas. And ever since that time, I have been involved in NGO. I currently serve as a youth advisor to the United Nations, Barbados, and Eastern Caribbean office. And I'm also the national coordinator for an NGO known as the Caribbean Youth Environment Network. I'm also a member of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change constituency member. And I'm also an international youth delegate heading to COP28 next week to speak about indigenous people and climate change, as well as the loss and damage funds for small island developing states and how developed countries can basically give funds so that small island developing state can improve their resilience. And also in that space as well, it is important to me personally because in 2017, Dominica announced to the United Nations that they had a plan to become the world's first climate resilient country in the entire world. And so far, that efforts are being made. We also have that goal of planting 5 million trees by 2050. Earlier this month, we also expressed our interest to be the only Caribbean country to move into hydro energy by 2025 as well. So we are making good strive in terms of building resilience and engaging young people in the space of climate change. So it's always a pleasure to be in these spaces and speak about climate change and how we can ensure that young people's voices are being engaged in decision-making processes as relates to climate change and environmental decisions. So that's
Right.
just the tip of the iceberg. Thank you so
Nice.
much.
Listen, I think you just wowed all of us. It's just so much amazing work is being done here. I think it's a privilege for me to even share this space with you all. I'm hearing so many different things. The audience is hearing so many different things. We've talked, Ferdison, a little bit about the importance of planting trees, and Dixon talked about the million trees that they're planting, and 600,000 have been planted, I think, in like 2 years. And when you joined, Raeesah was talking about the importance of really understanding that while we need global collaboration, we can't just have one policy or one way or one approach, because it really depends on the region, the people, the community, and what's happening in each individual space, right? So there can't just be one blanket approach that's going to work for everyone.
Yes.
So maybe that can segue us, to talking about what that collaboration could look like, and how youth advocates from different parts of the world can collaborate to amplify their impact. How do we share successful strategies for environmental advocacy so that we can overcome some of the, I guess, maybe generational divides, some of the physical divides, they may be divided by region, um, by language, culture, and experiences, but not looking at that division as a negative, but looking at it as actual diversity, right? In diversity in approaches. Um, and no one approach is better than the other, but in sharing, we can all stand to learn. I think, right, so you mentioned something in the beginning. What did you say about learning? The more we learn, I want you to say it.
No, it's
It's
just
your thing.
we were first talking to each other. You said something about me being the expert and knowing more, and I said actually I believe that the more you learn, the more you realize that you know nothing.
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, there's just so much. There's so much more. You can never ever stop learning.
yeah. So how can we, thank you. So how can we share those successful strategies? I think this is one way, right? Something like the Black Consciousness Festival allows us to do that. But have you had any specific experiences that have allowed you to share your approach with others, or was able to hear the approach of others, and it impacted any of the initiatives that you're involved in? Bryce, I see you nodding.
So, actually, this what you're asking about, there's been this a very like pivotal moment in my activism that was exactly that. It's changed the way I see things.
Mm,
So
okay.
when I was 17, that's when I started my climate activism. It was in 2019. I was in high school and I began doing performance art protest pieces to raise awareness about the climate crisis.
Mm.
And the first one I did was in an affluent area in a mall. And we sat pretending to eat plastic for 4 hours in silence. And people were walking past and mostly ignoring us. And obviously, affluent area in South Africa, it was white people. I
Mm.
was very candid. And then we
Yes.
did another piece the next year in the Maboneng precinct in Johannesburg, and that's in the Joburg CBD. It's very dangerous, but the Maboneng precinct is a space, like it's a street where there's lots of art, and
Mm.
on the weekends, people came in from the suburbs to enjoy the African experience, and the people coming in from the suburbs were white people, South
Okay.
Africa inequalities. And we did a piece where we walked up and down the street with placards, and we wore gas masks made out of plastic bottles and trying to raise awareness. And when I started doing this, I was, very angsty, angry teen. And
Okay.
I was just learning about the climate crisis, and I was like, why isn't everyone else angry? People don't know. We need to teach people. I took the space intending to teach people, and the people from the suburbs were walking past us. They didn't care, but it wasn't the people on the streets that were engaging with us. And when they engaged with us, I realized that I didn't need to teach them anything. I didn't need to come tell them that climate change happens. They already knew. One lady on the street, she was showing me how she made jewelry out of recycled plastic. People on the streets would start and talk to us, and they tell us about the climate crisis and climate change, and say how scared they are and say how hopeless they felt. And for me, that was such a massive moment in my own life, in my own activism, and that changed me completely, because I realized that I was entering these spaces with the assumption that I needed to teach people. But and that's the problem I think many organizations make, especially with dealing with working class people, with poor people. They assume that they don't know because they're poor or because they come from communities. The thing is, when we talk about climate change, we have inaccessible language and terminology. And when you ask that, question, the story popped into my head because it was so massive for me. And I think that if we want to engage with people and we want to engage with climate education, we need to enter spaces not with the intention of teaching, but with the intention of mutual learning, because people know about climate change. They know what a climate crisis is. What I found is that the lack of urgency comes from the fact that there are so many more pressing issues in people's lives. If you don't know where your next meal is coming from, if you don't know where you're going to sleep that night, the climate crisis isn't something that you feel will be your top priority. And I think in terms of intersectionality, that's something also really important that we need to consider in our approaches.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that story. I think it really hit home in that, there's healing found in that space, right? Where you realize that your assumptions are not correct. And in solutioning, there's really no space, I guess, for making assumptions, right? We have to be open and truly collaborative in a genuine way. And I see Dixon and Ferdison, you know, shaking their heads. So I want to give you an opportunity. Dixon, I know you haven't said anything in a little bit, so let me make some space for you. And earlier in the conversation, you did talk about the flooding and about the various things that were happening. You talked about the climate victims where you are, but despite those challenges, still planting the 600,000 trees, right? And still doing the work and having the conversations with the elected officials to raise their awareness. So where Raeesah, described using performance art as a way to engage. Dixon, what are some of the ways that in your region youth are engaging? What are some of the approaches that you've used or your community has used?
Whenever we get an opportunity to mention young people out there who are doing great things, it's always a pleasure. Like, it's only us who can recognize what other people are doing, because we represent a whole generation now. I can mention like 50 people in my country who are doing great things, who are transforming communities. I can start with Vanessa Nakate. We all know her. We all know how she inspired millions of young people to join the climate space to do something for their country. She's having a vast green initiative whereby she's reducing the use of firewoods, building the stoves, the green stoves in schools, giving out solar panels. This is great because it reduces on deforestation. I can talk about Tos Nicholas is an activist based in Fort Portal, doing amazing work with climate education, doing amazing work with tree planting and is having an initiative of starting up climate justice clubs in every school. It's nice,
Climate
like,
justice clubs. Tell us about those
yeah,
climate justice clubs. What does that look like, particularly in an area where schools get destroyed by floods?
yeah, like climate justice club. These are young people in schools who
Hmm.
embrace that there is climate change and we need to do something. What
Okay.
they do city cleanups, they do cleaning, plastic collection around the area. They do tree planting. They
Mm-hmm.
plant trees and look after them, not just planting. They grow trees.
Mm-hmm.
These are young people who go on radio stations talking about climate change and how we need climate justice as people from the global south. Because we
Okay.
all know the leading emitters, we know them, but we are
Mm-hmm.
at the front line of the climate crisis. So it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing work Tos Nicholas Viaranga is doing because very many young people want to join the Climate Justice Club. It's
Mm-hmm.
doing great. There is Crispus Mwemaho doing a lot of things in the camp also. I work with him in the camp. He's having a school in the camp. Imagine an activist starting up a school.
Hmm. It's powerful. It's rich. It's
It's
rich.
powerful. You can, yeah.
I mean,
And
listen, we could feel your energy.
it is run by this young man, paying
Mm,
all teachers, volunteers, and it's having kindergarten and a primary session,
yes.
building up a
Woo.
school in the camp. It's amazing work. And these
Oh,
people should be mentioned everywhere,
mm,
everywhere.
yes. Yeah.
Doing great. More in Asimwe into gender, helping out
Mm,
women victims. I can't
mm,
even mention how many people are doing great work in my country, and I really appreciate
yes.
every youth. I can mention there is Jonah
Mm,
Jidabo, there is Pamela Cimenta, there
mm,
is Pius. He's a DJ, a gospel DJ called DJ Pius, but
okay.
he's spreading the message in the church. Like
Oh,
after prayers, he comes out, talks about climate change, that this
mm,
is happening, and the best way to do it is to plant trees. After
mm.
praising the Lord, praying, you go home with a tree.
Yes. I think it's amazing. I'm just listening to you mentioning the names, and I think that there is strength, right? And there is power in actually mentioning the names of our people, our
Yeah,
people who are doing work that requires more than just themselves, right? It takes something
yeah,
a little more, it takes something, a higher power to even give them that strength and that tenacity to go beyond the limits, right? And to push beyond.
yeah,
I know, Ferdison, you mentioned some of the work that you do with the UN, and I know that's a global stage, right? So maybe if you could talk a little bit about the approach that you take and the approach of your peers and your community and what it looks like on that stage. Because despite what we might see and despite the impacts that we're seeing in the weather and in our local communities, whether it be with flooding or tornadoes, just all types of things that are happening across the globe, we do know that work is happening, right? And we know that conversations are happening and the needle is being pushed, right? There are people who are dedicating their life's time to this work. So, Ferdison, what does it look like on that stage to you? What are some of the examples that you're seeing, that you're hearing about, or that you're even speaking about?
Yes, so we have in Dominica, we have a specific ministry within our government that is responsible for the environment as well as the Kalinago people as well. And so far, a lot of initiatives has been undertaken from encouraging persons to move to proper waste disposal, as well as the encouragement of recycling a lot of materials. And it's been a good initiative so far. Persons are starting to get involved because what is often said in discussions, like for example, I had my climate justice conference in the indigenous community where we spoke about the importance of climate justice and young people. And we spoke about policy implementation in terms of climate change and securing the environment. However, a lot of persons move the notion that it's not really the government or policymakers to blame. It's the people who has to develop a mentality that they want to really see a change or they want to protect the environment. And this was an eye opener for me. So in Dominica, we've seen a lot of people. The people have been cooperating with the government and the various ministries, the various NGOs, to in terms of implementing various initiative planning in the near future to implement environmental studies in the school's curriculum to get young people more educated on climate change and its impact and how they can really look forward to engaging in a career that will help Dominica in its quest to remain in the world's first climate resilient country. And on the global stage, it's important because oftentimes you hear people talk about indigenous people in climate discussions. And it's important to note that indigenous people actually have the knowledge to combat the climate crisis that we are currently facing. And that's the call I've been always making, especially as it relates to the global stocktake, is that there needs to be the acceptance of indigenous knowledge coupled with efforts being undertaken in order to address the climate crisis. Cooperation is something that is not on our side globally. And I realize that's something countries need to understand per se. But even young people on the ground, for example, that are undertaking various initiatives. We have a group of 5 young ladies who actually created an app. It's called We Planet. They created an app where persons would be able to receive points if they if they don't use plastic bags as well. And that's an island-wide, and now they're even looking to implement it within schools as well. So imagine not just attending a climate conference to get you points that you can use further when you go shopping. And I mean,
so you know what? Sorry to interrupt you, but I have to interrupt you for just quickly. When you introduced yourself, you talked about this small place called Dominica. But let me tell you something. What you just described is huge, right? Because you're talking about an entire country that's doing this work and has created space. Well, maybe didn't create the space. Maybe occupied the space to lead the way and to have initiatives that are really demonstrating a sense of urgency. And I don't know, I think there's something to say about the fact that it's countrywide, that you're able to use technology, innovative, approaches, and having the attention of your government, of the ministry, in order to do this work. Raeesah, I see you shaking your head too. Were you gonna say something? Go ahead. No, go.
No, I wasn't saying anything. I was just very enthusiastically going, yes, it's big.
Awesome. No, but I think it's wonderful that a country like Dominica is able to show the world how to give Indigenous people, or to allow Indigenous people to not create barriers for Indigenous people to have a voice and to bring their creativity to a space that's not just impacting Dominica, but the world. So I'm hoping that the work that you're doing, not just here in the Black Conscious Festival, it's been expressed, but I also hope that it will get shared with the global community more and more, because Dominica is doing some powerful things based on what you described. So I'm sorry for interrupting you. I just wanted to sneak that in, because I kept thinking you said small.
Yeah, I mean it's small in size, but the people. And one effort I must highlight is that it's like when I started speaking, you would see a lot of Indigenous people being involved in these initiatives, and so far the government have embraced Indigenous people and including them in these spaces so much that last month, an Indigenous descent, we had our first female and Indigenous person hold the highest office as president in Dominica. And that's a huge deal for us, to be honest, because she's indigenous, and that proves to show you that Dominica is ramping up efforts to include indigenous people in decision making processes so much as high offices such as this. So I think that's we're trying to turn around history right there in
Yes, yes,
Dominica.
yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Ferdison. Raeesah, is there anything that you would like to share with us at this time? I think I'm just going to go around to everyone.
Yeah, no, I think just looking at the time and in wrapping up, what's really jumped out in this conversation is, well, intersectionality, but also there's so many themes of grassroots. Like Ferdison to talk about like the indigenous people, and everything happens on the ground. And I think when I think a really big thing that's come up in this is looking at everyone. And when people in power and when places like the UN look at everyone, they tend to look at everyone as statistics. But I think what we're doing here is really emphasizing that when we look at everyone as individuals. We look at everyone, their individual power and their individual capacity. And the work that we're doing, I think, serves to really push for the fact that we all have individual lives, we all have individual problems, we all have individual solutions, and we all have things that we need, that we know our communities need. And I think something really big here, and for me, because I'm so passionate about it, it doesn't seem revolutionary. And then I go to other spaces and just what a revolutionary thing it is to put such emphasis on grassroots and the individual problem. And I think, yeah, in this conversation, in this space, when Dixon and when Ferdison was speaking about the work that they're doing, and when you pointed out how Dixon was naming people, I was just, that's it. That's what we're doing. It's so many people doing this, but it's so important to name them all individually. And I don't even have words to wrap things up completely, but that's just feeling.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. You know, what I'm hearing from you, and I heard from everyone, I think, in me wrapping up, is that there is a deep sense of self-awareness of who we are, and understanding what we bring to the table and the strength that we bring to the table. And as you mentioned, Raeesah, it's, you know, doing the work and then saying, wait a minute, I didn't even think that was revolutionary, right? That our level of creativity it almost seems ordinary because it's so organic, right? So it's like it's the superpower that we have, right? I think there's also a social awareness in really understanding who we are in relation to others and people at large, which is phenomenal. There's also, you know, a spiritual awareness as well that goes beyond even, you know, our religions and our beliefs, but our connection to our soul's energy, you know, being connected to the energy around us, right? And the need to move, you know, not just seeing that there's a problem, but saying, no, I have to do something. And I think that is also really critical. And I think that's what I'm hearing from everyone here. So listen, thank you. Yeah. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. On behalf of the Black Consciousness Festival, and I think even our audience, I want to express gratitude to Ferdison and to Dixon and to Raeesah for sharing their perspectives and their experiences. It's certainly clear that the youth are at the forefront of this movement, and you know, to heal our planet, and together we can create a sustainable and resilient future. So thank you. I'm trying to fight the tickle in my throat. So thank you. This was an amazing conversation. So for our audience, Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining this conversation. And please visit the website, visit Facebook, visit the Instagram page for the Black Consciousness Festival. Share this conversation with others, and enjoy the other conversations in this year's festival. So once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Please continue in your power, in your pride, and in your practice. Thank you. Bye-bye.